Welcome to Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek. And welcome to our interview of Rob Miller. Rob Miller was born in Detroit, Michigan. As he says, at some point in the middle of a Devo concert in high school, he found music. Later, he moved to Chicago, and in 1993, he co-founded the independent record label Bloodshot Records, which became one of the most important sources of music for Chris and I ever. In 2025, he published The Hours Are Long, But the Pay is Low, A Curious Life in Independent Music on University of Illinois Press, which is an outstanding look into the world of alt country, Americana music, and independent music in general. He also hosts Miller's Cave on WRHZ 93.5 and WRHC 106.7 out of Sawyer and Three Oaks, Michigan. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We're really excited to have you. I get nervous occasionally. This is one of the shows I got nervous for.
Stop. Get out. I'm just a music nerd like you guys.
However, maybe a better music nerd than us. I think that was part of what was making me nervous. If you can be a better nerd. I don't know if that's true. We need to build a better nerd.
Well, the better nerd part, I wanted to, and I apologize, I'm a little sick. In reading your book, I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I'd heard of Trailer Bride, hadn't listened to them. I am listening to them now. Allen and Sons, the barbecue spot that you talked about, is just down the road from me. I've gone a couple times, but I was like, shit, he knows more about Chapel Hill than I do.
So I will lay this out for you too. I don't remember if we ever discussed this off record or off mic, but we've actually already dedicated an entire episode of our podcast to Bloodshot. Probably 6 or 8 months ago, we did an episode where we talked about how much we love the label, how important it was to us in the 90s and into the 2000s. When I saw your book came out, I took a wild swing because I was really hoping we'd get a chance to talk to you. So we're both really excited about it.
You know, if you guys are just going to keep saying nice things about me, I'm just going to sit here quietly. I'm not going to get in the way of that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We probably should ask you some questions or something.
No, keep going. This is great.
So tell us a little bit about how you decided to write this book.
Well, people had been coming at me for years to do something, but it was always framed as you should write the history of Bloodshot. And that always seemed very boring and limiting to me, because that obviously presupposes you know anything about Bloodshot or our bands or anything like that. And, you know, given our sales, obviously most of the world had never heard of us. So I was kicking around with some other publishers and some other editors on how to do this, how to frame it in such a way that would be interesting to somebody who had never heard of us. And it was during the kind of the isolation of COVID that I really hit on the idea of community and how my interactions with independent underground, not just music, but like bookstores, movie theaters, mom and pop diners, things like that. My exposure to those things as a kid informed everything I did eventually with the label. The decisions I made, the decisions I didn't make, how to proceed, how to, you know, not give in to the siren song of get bigger or always be more successful or look for the hit. All those things were informed by those exposures as a kid. And so that's where I felt that the hook could be, so that again, anyone who hadn't heard of us would feel in themselves like, oh, I found this record store when I was a kid, or I heard this radio station when I was a kid, or I went to this show at this weird little club as a kid. So even without knowing about my label, you could, the book universalizes the experience of underground music and independent ecosystems. And from there, once I kind of found that, it really became all of a sudden I had way too much stuff. The first pass that I sent to my editor and friend, she was like, "Wow, that's a lot." She refers to it as maximalist. So then it
Wait,
was just a 2 year long process of honing and taking a machete to large sections of it. So
and the sections that you lopped off, the ones that you edited down, were they similar in the sense that they were anecdotes, lots of stories, personal stories about the people and the places that you were and went to during that period of time?
well, yeah, it was a lot of not, I don't want to say the same, but it was just, I always err on the side of overwhelming people with examples, and that's kind of what I did. So then just as the process went along, it was which two or three examples spoke best to my point, which ones were the most clear examples of this rather than here's 10, you know.
Well, and that's the thing about the book that I recommend to potential readers is that it is stories. It is not a dry history of we did this thing and then we met these people and then we traveled to South by Southwest or whatever it might be. There are lots of very personal stories that are in there, and that's what I found very interesting in the book itself. But it also led me to wonder, were you taking notes the whole time? Do you have a perfect memory? Because
Yeah.
all of the information that you had, I'm that guy that can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, and it was incredible to me the amount of detail you had and just how many stories there were.
Anyone who knows me or has seen me at clubs will see me with my little notepad, which I left
Ah,
upstairs when I ran down here to do this. Yeah, I've been carrying notebooks with me for decades, and because I wrote all the press releases and the ad copy and most of the web content, and so I phrases would come to me, while I was watching a show, or you're just in the moment. You're like, most of us are like, oh, there's no way I'll forget that. And you wake up in the morning and,
yeah,
Yep.
you know, half
that's
in bed,
exactly
half
right.
out of bed, one sock over here. You're like, wait, what was I trying to remember? So in the moment, I was very good over the years of just even writing down a phrase here or there. And I've been doing that since I was in college. I had a good creative writing professor who was like, you think you will remember it and you won't. Like, have a notebook by your bedside because you'll wake up in the middle of the night and go, this is the most genius idea I've ever had. There's no way I'll forget it. You roll over the next morning, you wake up the next morning, you have your bowl of Fruit Loops and go, I seem to recall having a good idea in the middle of the night, and then it's gone. So,
I have the same. I don't think I'm as good about it as what you described, but I will jot things down. I'll be in the middle of a concert, particularly since we started this podcast and we also started a blog. I've tried to write stuff down. My problem is when I look at it the next morning, even when it's written in my phone, I still don't remember what the hell I was talking about. So
written in my phone.
yeah, how about that?
The Luddite in me shudders quietly.
Well, I do believe we're roughly the same generation, the three of us. So it has been a hard adjustment for me, but I have to admit, my kids have dragged me kicking and screaming into at least the end of the 20th century, if not all the way to the 21st.
Yeah, I can't make that adjustment. I downloaded Google's journal because I had read good reviews about it, and I haven't read a goddamn thing in it. I mean, it's just I still have. I mean, I still
Yeah,
have
and
my
there's
little
something
paper right
there's
here that I.
there's something about the physical act of writing as well that
Yep.
even there were many an occasion where I couldn't understand my writing, but the fact that I was physically writing it jogged something in my memory. Even if I could pick out one word of the gibberish I wrote down, everything would fall back into place. There's something about that physical act, for me at least, that
Yeah, that
that
makes
helps
sense.
the process.
When you wrote this book, did you write it longhand? Did you type it
Oh
on an
God,
old-fashioned typewriter?
I'm not that much of a.
Plus, at our age, you start to cramp up.
And it's so hard to find good turkey quills anymore.
The other question I had is along the same lines is Did you go back and interview your old colleagues, other artists, other people involved in either management or promotion or those kind of things as you prepared for the book, or was it mainly from your own notebooks and your own memory?
It was, yeah, I've gotten that question a couple times, which I'd never considered while I was writing it. No, this was absolutely me. I didn't talk to anyone. There were a couple of fact checks that I did. One that I remember is I emailed Mary from the Detroit Cobras to make sure I had the model of car that we had our meeting in correct. And but other than that, yeah, it was. I mean, it's nakedly subjective. So
And it reads that way, but in a very entertaining way. I jotted down just a couple things, but you used the phrase. You were describing a song by Tom T. Hall, and you used the phrase "snorting pixie sticks," and that'll never leave my head. And I assume now that you've described your process that that was probably jotted down at some point while you were sitting listening to the song being played.
maybe, maybe not.
Fantastic,
Maybe
phrase.
maybe that's something that one doesn't outgrow. Maybe that's still.
Fair enough.
And I wish I had taken some more notes when I was younger. I grew up in Cincinnati and I always consider that to be home. I remember going to some club one night and the band, the Raisins, not the California Raisins, the Raisins, who later became the Bears with Adrian Belew,
Oh yeah.
were playing, and I just hung out there, and I vaguely remember that, but those like connections to those clubs, and like you said, the record stores and I still remember the call letters of the radio stations I listened to. So Tom and I have talked about home. What do you consider home? I mean, we talk about Detroit and Chicago, or do you not have that concept in the same way?
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I would say I am a bone deep Midwesterner.
Yeah,
I would say that even though I've lived longer in Chicago than I did in Michigan, I still consider myself a Michigander. But it's very fluid. Last summer when the ice raids were happening in Chicago, man, I was a Chicagoan. I was out there, like my rankle was up, and
yeah,
and I was very pissed about all that, and took it very personally. But yeah, I mean, Detroit is more of a at this point more of a concept to me because when I go back, it's been for the better. Obviously, it's been completely remade. I mean, the Detroit of my youth is
yeah.
is gone. I go to where my grandma, where I spent a lot of time growing up, and it's just gone. In a way, this urban a level of urban decay that is hard to describe unless you go there and see it. Even there are bad parts of Chicago and underserved and underdeveloped parts of Chicago, but it's nothing on the scale that was Detroit in the 80s and 90s into the 2000s. And I would drive around with my mother who grew up on the edge of Hamtramck, and she would just burst into tears. It was just like
Mm,
everything was gone. So yeah, yeah, the idea of home is where the people I love are, and
yeah,
and where I am right then.
And I would
that makes
imagine the
sense.
transition from both Detroit and then Chicago to where you are now is pretty significant. I mean, again, I've been to Three Oaks, Michigan. I won't go so far as to say it's sleepy, but it's a little drowsy.
You may say sleepy. Yeah, I mean, we're only out here. We're only out here depending on the weather and like during COVID, we were out here 80% of the time. But now it's 50-50, maybe a little more here with the book stuff happening. I'm in the city a lot more, and there's things I absolutely miss about it. And can't see turning my back on anytime soon entirely. But
The
it
book
it, it is
is,
a very sleepy out here, and it can be a little how shall we say monochromatic in
yes,
some
I,
ways.
I did notice that as well.
Which
I, I
and I have to drive entirely too far and make entirely too much effort to get any sort of decent Thai food. So it's never gonna be a place I'm gonna be 100% comfortable.
I will say that just the level of detail in the book, not only describing, as I said, the music business side of things, but also the Chicago side of things, the clubs, the stores, the restaurants. It really led me to see a tremendous connection that you have with the city. And it sounds like you do spend quite a bit of time back here in the Chicago area, as opposed to just always out in sleepy Sawyer or Three Oaks. But that's the other aspect I'm interested in, is how you remember all those things, I guess, and how you go about getting it all down on the page.
Well, again, it was to the idea of universalizing the experience. Like maybe you had never seen any of the Bloodshot bands at Empty Bottle or Lounge X, or maybe you didn't come to music until after Lounge X was closed. But if I
Mhm.
named all these things, or if I described all these places and all these things that are just part of the fabric of the city, then you have something to relate to in the book. And again, it was just carrying around a notebook. And I was in DePaul. I was at DePaul doing graduate work and doing a lot of creative writing there. And you just had that little book with you. And I would often go to Jerry's Grill after shows at Montrose and Western, 3 in the morning, and have my grilled cheese sandwich and my glistening fries to help ward off the hobgoblins the next morning. And I would just write down a few things of what I saw that night and or what I felt, because that's the thing. You can I could easily just have run down a list of shows that I saw, but when you're in the moment, like there's things that happen in that community environment that that are rather ephemeral, and if you don't capture them right then it's just kind of like, oh, I went and saw this show.
Yeah.
And that's that. But yeah, I have been getting a lot of response from people like, oh my God, that really took me back to this spot, and that was never my intention, was to like have the book be like this kind of nostalgia trip. But to me, I was describing these things to not be nostalgic, but to emphasize the importance of these independent communities and how it's not just music, it's not just this thing, it's an entire tapestry of creativity that made the city and makes the city so
Yeah.
compelling and so interesting, and was such a magnet for people like me in the early 90s to come to. Because if you were a Midwesterner in the early 90s and you wanted to live in a city, you came here,
Yeah.
because that was where there felt like there was opportunity and a chance to just like, try stuff, and that's kind of been the Chicago story since its founding. I mean, it was a place to come to invent yourself or reinvent yourself or bury the past or just do stupid shit. And if it worked, great. If it didn't, you could try something else. Where, Detroit at that time did not present those opportunities to me and so many others.
Yeah, it's funny. Chris and I both went to school in St. Louis in the 80s. We both, graduated in the late 80s. And St. Louis had a small, I think, world such as Chicago, but in scale, it was nothing compared to what you've described and the way it was, particularly in the 90s. I mean, some great music came out of the St. Louis area, the metro area, including Belleville and, all of the Uncle Tupelo stuff. And because we were living on and near a college campus, we got a little taste of that. But neither of us really got exposed to it, truthfully, until the mid 90s. And for me, a lot of that had to do with Bloodshot Records, with reading No Depression magazine, which led me to the albums that were advertised there. I had a regular correspondence, with that company in terms of ordering the albums, the records, the new Robbie Folks, whatever it might be that came down. And I was never in it, but I really feel like your book gave the detail and the immediacy of feeling like what it must have been like to be right in the middle of it. And Chris and I were kind of on the outskirts of all of that, I think, as we were,
Well,
in our 20s.
St. Louis was one of the first larger cities to catch on to what we were doing. I was in St.
Yes.
Louis several times a year, going to Cicero's or off Broadway or in Soulard and uh and yeah, there was a very vibrant scene down there. What was that? The Mississippi River Music Festival, which was
That
kind of
came a
like,
little later, I think,
yeah,
because I don't
whenever
remember hitting that.
every region wanted to all this when South by Southwest started to catch on, everyone wanted to like have their own little music
Yep.
festival. So yeah, St. Louis was a great place. We had bands coming up from there all the time. They'd be staying at my house which was kind of the touring musicians flop house for a long time. And yeah, so that it was part of that, yeah, that Midwestern regionality sensibility.
Chris and I lived 2 blocks from Cicero's. We
Yeah,
spent
we would.
we spent almost every Wednesday or Thursday, whatever night the cover charge was cheap was when we were there. But we were in the basement bar, God, at least probably once a week.
Yeah, it's one of those, disgusting, claustrophobic, ill thought
Yes.
out, ill planned, poor sight lines,
Yep, yeah, that's
kind of
exactly.
places that is kind of impossible to imagine happening now.
Right.
Yeah, I do. I really compliment though the immediacy of the writing. I really I'm interested to know. Do you have anything coming up? Are you thinking about writing more?
Yeah, that's the great conundrum, isn't it? You have a lifetime to write that first book, and then it goes well, and everyone's like, "Well, when's the second one?"
It's your first album, right?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate those comments, and I've been getting that a bit too about the immediacy of it, and I never thinking about it. I never wrote when I was writing. I wasn't writing as if it was something that had happened. I did write a lot of it in the first person, and then afterwards maybe edit it, not first person, but present tense. And then in the editing process went into the past tense or past tenses, and I think weirdly that gave it a sense of like this is happening now, like there was a current momentum to it that kept it from being too much of a nostalgia piece, which I didn't want it to be at all. As far as other stuff coming up, yeah, I've got a piece coming up in an anthology of Midwestern music writing. I'm hoping it'll be out in the fall. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm always script. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow and somebody went through my papers, there would be an 800 page, Confederacy of Dunces Part Two waiting. So yeah, we'll see. I didn't know how this was going to go. This is also peculiar to me because I spent the entirety of my what appears to be my adult life uh, with the label. Before that, as a production manager, stage manager, college radio DJ, fanzine writer, talking about other people and their projects, promoting them. So this whole notion of promoting myself is not only alien but a little disgusting and just very weird. So whenever I did stuff for the label, my staff had done a very good job of creating sort of a semi-fictionalized version of myself for the public face, and I could kind of hide behind that. But being out there with this, it's like I'm out here on my own promoting me, which like I said is a little uncomfortable. So we'll see. I mean, it's going really well so far.
Yeah, so far so good, right?
Yeah. I mean, I
Uh,
didn't know if I was going to write this thing and like seven people would be like, "Well, that was pretty good," and then I would just slink off into the woods, and that would be that. So we'll see.
well, you got two people here that thought it was really, really good, and appreciated the stories. I do have one question. I don't think you covered this in the book, but was there any special story behind the Bottle Let Me Down, the kids' music album? Because that was one of my all-time favorites. I would play it in the car with my kids so that they'd have kids' music, but I could listen to all the artists that I loved. I'd always go out and try to find albums that I loved, but I'd never found anything like that one.
It was the early 2000s. Kids music was, we were still in it was pre-Napster or pre-Spotify, all, Apple tunes and all
Yeah.
that. So the CD cash cow was rolling merrily along. Not to mix metaphors there. And kids music was one of those things that was killing it. So
Yeah.
I had seen Robbie Folks do a song called Eggs at probably the Hideout or maybe the Abbey Pub, and it was just side splitting. And Alejandro was doing I just turned the big 1-0 at shows a lot, and I
Yeah.
thought,
Yeah.
well, there's gotta be a kids record in here somewhere. And we were doing this was back when our compilations would do really well, and it was
Yeah.
those were fun things to put together. It allowed artists to kind of do things that they might not normally do for their albums and be a little looser with things, and it came together pretty quickly. And with Rex Hobart doing It's Not Easy Being Green, and my favorite song off that record, which I keep going back to because it's so goddamn hilarious, is Don't Wipe Your Face on Your Shirt by Cornell
Yes.
Herd Band. Uh, and then, we got Kelly Hogan to do like a saucy, rubber ducky song. That was my request because that was my favorite song growing up. Uh,
Oh, that's awesome.
being
That's
a big
That
Sesame
is.
Street fan, and being a big Bert and Ernie fan, and I had no idea that she was going to do like a Peggy Lee saucy torch version of it that would have, the kids would be like, "Yay, this is a fun song," and the dads would be like, "Well, tell me, Kelly Hogan, I would like to take a bath with you."
Exactly.
So yeah,
That-
I love that record. It works on a lot of levels. Like when I grew up watching Bugs Bunny cartoons, and
Yep.
those worked on all kinds of levels. Like when you're watching them when you're 8, you're laughing at certain things, but then when you're watching them when you're 28, you're like, wow, there's some jokes going on here that I did not get back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, my oldest was born in '02, so I don't think I bought it until then, but literally she could not have been 6 months old and it was already playing, next to the crib. And then I had, my sons were born a little bit later, and it's still just listening on a loop until probably they were 10 or 12
Wait,
years old.
are you guys setting me up for blaming me for any problems that the
Yeah,
children
by the
have later
way,
in life? Because
you
I read the
you gotta
fine print.
there's a couple traffic tickets I need you to take care of, buddy.
I mean, if you rub lemon juice on the back of that CD, you'll see that we are not responsible for any juvenile delinquency.
No, my kids love music, and I think it has a lot to do with that kind of thing. You mentioned the Abbey, just real quick. I saw Robbie Folks play a kids concert. It was I think it was a fundraiser for a Montessori school up in Chicago, and a friend of mine's band was playing first, and then there were two, and Robbie Folks ended up headlining that, and it was such a blast. It was so much fun. It was just a riot.
So there's brilliant artists that we all listen to and we try to figure out why they weren't bigger. One that I hear all the time, and he lived in the same town I do, is Dexter Romweber. And I think you talked about it too, about how brilliant he was. I mean, is there anything like either specific about him or artists like that that hold them back from becoming more popular, or is that not even a standard that they care about? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean that's the big question. Can you imagine Dex being popular? I mean, they're
No.
just tuned into a different wavelength, and yeah, he would have liked to have been popular, but it wasn't. I mean, he was responding to figurative, if not literal, voices that only he was hearing
Yeah.
about how to sound and what to do. But he's one of those artists that, like the Velvet Underground, or like nobody bought the record, but everyone who did formed a band and went on
Right.
to influence all this other stuff. And he's one of those guys, like, no one who listens to Dex or was into Dex forgot him. He's not one of those people that I don't find many people who are like, yeah, I like Dex okay.
Right.
Either they're absolute fanatics like I am, or they're like, that is not for me at all. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And I don't know. I don't know what I would do with myself if I lived in a world where Dex Romweber was popular. Like that would just upset the order of things in a way. But yeah, it was always frustrating that he couldn't make a comfortable living at what he did because so many people loved him. Jack White, Nico Case, and the list of people who are Dex freaks is legion, and all those people are influential in their own way in the music business. But yeah, for himself, the last time I saw him, there was 10 people there.
Yeah.
And there's he was picking he wasn't interested in popular music as we understand it, or popular culture as we understand it. He was picking from the weird underbelly bits that have always fascinated me as well. Like that band right back there,
Yeah,
the
right.
Cramps.
Yep.
And
Tramps.
somebody like Dex, I would look at the songs he would cover and then go back and find the originals. And these are demented artifacts of American musical history, and that's what invigorated him. That's what exploded out of him. So for it to be all of a sudden become popular would be just so bizarre. Every once in a while, somebody like the White Stripes can come along and tap into the zeitgeist of popular culture with this baggage that they have with them, or this influence, these influences, and you nudge the cruise ship a little bit in one direction. But yeah, it would be a very weird world if teenagers were blasting down the highway with decks blowing out.
Although I'll point this out, I don't think I mentioned this to you, Chris, but so my kids were home for spring break. My boys were home for spring break last week, and they were binge watching this cheesy streaming series called The Runarounds. And it's one of those a bunch of kids make a band show, which I usually get sucked into pretty well myself. And I happen to be watching one of the episodes, and it's set in North Carolina. It's set near where you live, Chris. And they name dropped Dex. And it shocked me. I was going to text you as soon as it happened. And then I was like, well, what else is going to happen in this show? Because this is certainly not what I expected. Because otherwise, it was like watching a WB show. But out of the blue, his name came up, and I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, maybe there's somebody
Yeah.
out there still.
And I should mention that I will be coming down to Chapel Hill in June for Dex Fest.
Okay.
Which is a
I'll go.
celebration of Dex and his
Yep.
music. And I got offered to come down there and do a book event. Dex's sister invited me down, and getting to know his family has been, one of the great honors of this book thing. Um, but yeah, I mean that people like Dex are kind of that weird invisible thread running through American musical history that you don't even know it's there, but people who do know about Dex, they glom onto it with claws, because he's so amazing, and then they impart that out into the world in their own way too, and it's just part of that continuity of music. And I gotta say, when his manager called me up and said, "Hey, would you be interested in putting out a Dex Romweber record?" I don't even know that I listened to it first. I was like, "This is," when moments like that present themselves, you just say yes, just because you are, I felt like I had to pay back into the rock and roll continuum what it had given me, and so to give somebody like Dex any opportunity I can, that was just a no-brainer.
That's awesome. Well, this is a good point. I want to make sure that we do a little plugs because you're apparently not very good at doing it yourself. Look for the book. The hours are long, but the pay is low. You can find it on bookshop.org. Rob also has a website called robmillerwriting.com. He's holding up the book now. By the way, great cover. I don't know who designed the cover, but it's very striking, like it catches your eye. I will brag a little bit and tell you that I ordered the book. I think I had the book before I reached out to you to see if you might be willing to come on the podcast. So I think I was about a third of the way through when you said yes. I was really fired up about it, as I said. Also, you can find Rob's radio show.
RadioHarborCountry.org.
Perfect, perfect. You can find that streaming, and you can, if you happen to be in Michigan, you can hear it on WRHZ 93.5 and WRHC 106.7. Also, Rob has an Instagram account, Rob Miller Writing, and you can find the book on www.press.uiillinois.edu as well. So all of those links will be on our As Mentioned page at thirdsonginpodcast.com as well. So feel free to go to our site and click on the links and pick up this book as soon as you can.
I appreciate you liking the design. It's a university press, so they're used to doing, things like the salamanders of Southeast Illinois, or
Right.
19th century Mormon lace making. And so when I was talking to the designer and filling out some forms and stuff, I said, there's a lot of content. Have fun with it, and go for kind of the cut and paste and the Samizot vibe that I've got going in a lot of the book, and he did, and he actually won some University Press design award for it
Really?
end of last
That's
year.
awesome.
So I was like, yeah, really happy for him. He did a great job. I really and praise to the press for allowing them to do something a little out of their normal wheelhouse.
Yeah, and by the way, great title for the book as well. I think the title catches your ear, and as I said, I thought the cover really caught my eye. Anyway, that's awesome that it's actually won some awards.
Well, I will send that little clip right there along to several people who made me really fight for that title.
Nice.
All right, that's going to bring us to our special playlist. We ask guests like Rob to suggest a theme. His is transformative songs from your youth you didn't know were covers, and when you found out they were, they led to all sorts of crate digging wonders. That's a fantastic theme, and
And just rolls off your tongue, doesn't it?
It's a nice writing sample as well. So the way we do this, Rob, is we always give our special guest the honor of the first and last pick on this 10-song playlist. You did provide us with your songs in advance, so usually it's so we don't overlap. I don't think there was going to be much chance of an overlap from any one of us on this particular list. The first song on this playlist you selected was the song "She Said" by The Cramps.
Yeah, that's a song that I heard from the Cramps sing them live, and for those of you who haven't heard it, it is just this demented 2.5 minute song of pure madness, and you think, my God, the Cramps are demented geniuses. But then when you see it on the record, you saw that they didn't write it, and you see H. Adkins, and you think, well, what's that? And then you look it up, and you do some sleuthing pre-internet of like who this might be, and it's by this West Virginia lunatic called Hazel Adkins, the Haze, and he recorded this song originally in the 1950s, and it was one of those moments where you're like, because when you're a young punk rocker, you think everything that came before you was garbage or trite or irrelevant, and that the 1950s were oldies, and Peggy Sue and Bebop, like stuff like that at the Hop. And it wasn't that there were a lot of lunatics back then, that there have always been underground lunatics in
Right.
American music, and the Cramps and She Said led me down that rabbit hole.
And I forgot to say initially, but you'll be able to find this particular playlist on any streaming service, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, etc. You'll be able to search for it. It will be subtitled "A Third Song In Playlist." I'm not quite sure what we're going to title this one because the description is a little lengthy, so I want to shorten that up a bit. But anyway, you'll be able to find it. Actually, it's already out by the time you listen to this episode. We generally put them out the Friday before. So
How about grave robbing
there you go.
There you go.
Done.
We got it.
with ROB capitalized in there?
I
Oh,
like
nice.
it.
There
Done.
we go.
See, that's why we should rely more on professionals.
We should. 'Cause
What's
God
your
knows what
first song for the playlist, Chris?
All right. So I'm going to have a bit of a caveat. Tom knows this. All through college, I was sadly a hair metal fan. It wasn't until a little bit later in life that I started to expand my horizons and went all in with more Americana, alt country, whatever you want to call it. So mine are a little bit later in life. One of my favorite artists that you talk about in the book is Alejandro Escovedo. And I don't know if it's his original band, but an earlier band of his, Rank and File. I'm an old man, from one of their early albums, which is an old Lefty Frizzell song. I think Merle Haggard also did it. It's been covered quite a bit. But I saw him live at the Ram's Head in Annapolis, they call it a listening room. And he came out and said that they asked him to, not play too loud, and he could step up his guitar, and I said, fuck that. And he just like, it's like one of the most raucous concerts I saw at the Ram's Head. He was awesome. Talked about how Rank and File was one of the most hated bands and all this other stuff, but showing their true country roots, that sort of combination of that punk and country together, is why this song has been one of my favorites. And again, much later in my life, but still an important song for me.
I remember picking that up at a record store in Detroit and not ever having heard anything like it. That's the first time I heard that song as well, off that record.
Cool. All right, my first song for the playlist is Janis Joplin from Pearl, Me and Bobby McGee. Straight from my parents' collection of vinyl back when I was in probably junior high school, I guess, at that point. I know even at that time, I should have realized it was a Kris Kristofferson song, but I absolutely did not. It eventually led me to realize that Kris Kristofferson was more than just the guy who was in A Star Is Born with Barbra Streisand. Turns out, crazy talented songwriter and performer. Even knowing that, her version is the version as far as I'm concerned. I love Janis Joplin. And it took me a long time to figure out that that was a cover song. So that's my first song.
A song like that's right up there with, Aretha Franklin's Respect.
Right.
It's just like they just inhabited it and took it. It's their song.
Doesn't matter who wrote it. Exactly. Yeah. It's all hers. Which takes us then back to you, Rob, for your pick, fourth pick on the playlist, and it is Preaching the Blues by the Gun Club.
Yeah, off their first album, and Fire of Love. And they came out of LA when it was all hardcore punk, Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Adolescents, things like that. And I don't know why I picked up this record. I maybe heard it late night on one of the radio shows I talk about that I heard as a kid, and it is just ferocious punk inflected blues, or blues inflected punk. And it introduced me to, there's some lyrics in there about that I'd heard in other blues songs, and I was like, well, what's going on here? And then, again, doing some digging and some reading, and I found out that was a Robert Johnson song, and that's where, like, the whole idea of music that I'm hearing right now, or right now in the 1980s, its roots go back 100 years. These tropes, these ideas, and some of the actual lyrics have been hanging in the trees and in the air and in the soil of our country for 100, if not hundreds of years. And it was, you might not immediately see or understand, like, how somebody coming out of, like, the heroin soaked streets and alleys of LA in the 80s connects to plantation life 100 years, but it did. And it's in us. Like, this is part of our shared musical heritage. And that began for me a long and ongoing journey into digging up this kind of music as well.
My next one is a little embarrassing, and it's a little bit later in life, which is why it's even more embarrassing. But I talked a little bit about my fascination with this idea of hometown and hometown artists. Not quite hometown, but Micah Schnabel from Two Cow Garage did a great version of what turned out to be the Replacements' Can't Hardly Wait. It was one of my favorite songs off of his album. And I was a little slow to backtrack to the Replacements. So I was all into that thinking it was his song. And then I played that and I'm like, holy shit, I covered that song. What a dumbass I am. But It's a great song. It should have been more to get me into the Replacements than that, but I thought he did a really nice job with that song. He's one of my favorites. He's pretty underappreciated. I like what he's doing these days.
But that's, that's one of the great things about music. And, it's so easy to fall into that, that tar pit of, I can't believe you didn't know who that was,
Right.
Right.
but we all come at music at different points in our life and in different ways through different avenues. And if it takes something like that at whatever point in your life to be turned on to all this other stuff and what it can all spider web into, then whatever. I mean, one of the things that turned me off about the hardcore scene in Detroit was like, yeah, everyone was, a lot of people became like, oh, you haven't heard of that yet, or
Mhm.
oh, you just heard that. I heard this song. I heard of Minor Threat 3 months before you did.
Right.
And it's just like, what are we doing here?
Well, Rob's a lot nicer than me, Chris, because I was just going to say, you didn't know that? All right, my next song for the playlist is a Joe Cocker song from I Can Stand a Little Rain in 1974. It's the song You Are So Beautiful. Very similar to me and Bobby McGee. I just had no idea anybody else did that song at all. This is weird because it's a cover of a Billy Preston song, but they both came out in the same year. So, and I didn't go deep enough to see, probably it was written by someone else and they both just got, got a handle on it. But I love that song so much and was shocked to find out that that wasn't an original Joe Cocker song. So that'll be my pick for the number 6 song on the playlist, which takes us to the number 7 song on the playlist. And Rob, looking at your list, you have Mama Get the Hammer, There's a Fly on My Baby's Head by Barrence Whitfield and the Savages.
Yeah,
That's a great title.
it is. And again, so Barrence Whitfield and the Savages, they came out of Boston in the early 80s, and we were lucky enough to put out 3 or 4 of their albums later on. Again, that was one of those moments where it's like you get an opportunity to pay back rock and roll karma, you jump at it. But for me, Barrence Whitfield and the Savages were to R&B and soul what the Cramps were to like rockabilly and psychobilly. They were like the gateway drug that led me to this whole world that, popular culture either forgot or buried or never knew about in the first place. So here's a song that it's played at, punk rock tempo, but horn solos and greasy R&B guitar, and it's called Mama Get the Hammer, There's a Fly on My Baby's Head. I mean, that is demented. But then you find out it's by this guy Bobby Peterson who recorded it on an obscure label in the 50s. And you're like, my God, what else don't I know about? What
Yes.
what else is in America's musical skeleton closet? And that was the band, and that was the song that was emblematic of the band that made me start digging into old R&B and soul records and finding out like everything that we thought was wild and crazy rock and roll back in the 50s was watered down for, a broader audience, that there was some genuinely demented, dare I say, punk rock stuff going on in the 50s.
By the way, circling back to your book, that's a great segment of the book. I can't remember if it's an entire chapter or it's just kind of interspersed, but your discussion of signing them and them coming to your label at that time was really interesting. It really did share and kind of illustrate what you've been talking about, which is just paying back and your approach when you were at the label. And I really enjoyed that part of the story.
Well, and one of the questions I always got over the years was, what is the process to sign a band, as if there was a process. And so I did go through several bands and talk about, because each signing it had its own genesis story and its own circuitous path. And I just wanted to emphasize that, yeah, there was no one way to get on the label. It started with, did I like the music, and then you figure out everything else afterwards. So yeah, Barron's was definitely one of those. My God, I'm getting this opportunity. Like run with it before someone tells you not to.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, there was also either an appendix or just a chapter that talked about what I would have to call ineffective ways of getting on the label, which I found to be
Yeah.
really funny as well.
Yeah, that was something that in the first draft was in the body of the work, in the body of the book, and my editor was like, "We can't. It just grinds the narrative to a halt." But I was like, "But there's so much good material here."
Oh, it's
So
so
we
funny.
we came to the compromise to put it in its own appendix, and yeah, people have been getting a lot of laughs out of that.
Yeah, the appendices of the book are probably worth the price of purchase alone, by the way.
Well, good, because I'm a book nerd that way. So, the my main editor was like, "Do you really want to do this stuff? Like, what are you working from? What are you trying to achieve?" And I was like, "Have you ever seen the movie Airplane?" And he said yes. And I was like, "Watch the end credits." So if you watch the end credit roll, there's all these like fake jobs and like just weird little jokes in there. And
Right.
as a kid, I was that guy who sat there and watched the credits, and I'm seeing like the funny things that are in there, and I was like, okay, I want to do that here too. So pay attention.
That's well done. It was well done. All right, Chris, what do you have for your final song?
I chose this one just for Tom because I know he hates this band.
Not a big fan.
But they're one of my favorites. They started pushing me towards a little bit darker music, but 16 Horsepower did a cover of which forever I didn't know was a Dylan song, but the song "Nobody Except You" is one of my all-time favorite songs. And Tom, if you listen to that one, you should like. It's not as dark as some of
Depressing.
the other stuff. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'll
But I
always
love
listen once
David.
at least.
Yeah, I love David Eugene Edwards. Just even the way he on stage, he's just a weird dude. Brings a really weird presence to that music. But that got me going back to start thinking about a little bit more, not traditional, but the precedent before, because all his stuff is very religious and very dark, and this seems just as dark. So I was shocked that it was a cover, but it's a great album.
Yeah, they were a band I came to pretty late. Like they played Chicago all the time, and I somehow never saw them. And our label manager at the time was friends with them and a big fan, and we put out our 10th anniversary compilation. And he said, here's this.
That's
Here's this
right.
band 16 Horsepower, and they had just broken up, I think.
Yeah.
And I heard the song. I was like, this is astounding. Like it's got the kind of vibe of really ancient murder ballads, but with this real dissonant sound to them. And since then, yeah, I've been a big fan. So yeah, I regret not paying more attention to them.
And this is going to sound so dumb, but it reminded me a little bit of the book where I read an article right after they broke up where he was going to go touring by himself. And he said that, the other guys didn't want to tour, but he had to pay the bills. Like he wouldn't be able to afford, his rent if he didn't, go out on tour. And that it's going to sound dumb as I said, but I was like, what? Like I buy your albums. You can't like I just assumed that
It's 15 bucks
if
right
people
there.
if people had CDs out there and if I knew of them, other people had to know of them. But yeah, that was my first, naive introduction to the fact that people that I loved could barely make it. And there's still like I saw Corey Brannon a little
Oh,
while ago and there was maybe 10 people there, counting
yeah.
me and the road people. So
Yeah. He's a great example. Somebody that we were able to put out three records by that objectively he's an amazing songwriter. So
yeah,
literate and there's so much depth to his songs. And yet, yeah, you go to these clubs and nobody's there.
Yeah.
right.
And it just shows that, this is not a meritocracy. This racket is not a
Exactly.
All
meritocracy.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
exactly.
Okay, my final pick for the playlist is Moonshiner, performed by Uncle Tupelo from March 16th to 20, 1992. I actually thought that Farrar wrote that for the longest time. And I guess it just shows I didn't look at the liner notes because I bought the CD. Like I had liner notes at that point. But it's an old folk ballad. It was also covered by Dylan. I didn't realize that. And a band called the Clancy Brothers. Did not realize it. I love the song Moonshiner. It's probably my favorite Uncle Tupelo song. I probably listen to it at least once every month just on principle. And I hadn't had a chance to get it on his playlist yet. So this seemed like a good, when I realized it was a cover, I jumped all over it. So that's my final choice for the playlist. And the finale, the final song is Sing, Sing, Sing by Flat Duo Jets.
Which brings us full circle back to Dex
Yep.
Romweber. That's Dex
Yep.
Romweber's band. And so I first saw Flat Duo Jets open for the Cramps when I was
Wow.
a production manager for that show. And usually, and I tell the story in the book, usually, I was first one in, last one out of these shows, 10 a.m. to 2 or 3 a.m. And opening band time usually meant nap time for me. But I ran into Dex backstage and I was like, well, this seems like it could be interesting. And I was just floored by their show. And I got them to they gave me one of their self titled debut LPs, and I took it home and have since played it to unplayability. And But on that album and live, they did "Sing Sing Sing," which is a Benny Goodman cover. And what does a 1980s North Carolina psychobilly punk band have any business doing a 1930s Benny Goodman song? And it works. And I went out and got the Benny Best of Benny Goodman or whatever, and that's where I discovered Gene Krupa. And then you just find again,
Uh,
like you go back and you find all this stuff that completely informed and infected what you're listening to right now that you think is like utterly original.
right.
And it is in its own way, but it's also picking the bones of all this stuff that came before. And I'll never forget seeing them do Sing Sing Sing.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, this is going to be a kick-ass playlist. It is out now. You can find it anywhere you stream your music. It is called, I'm just calling it right now, Grave Robbing, a third song in playlist. Thanks to you, Rob, for the title.
You'll be hearing from my attorney later.
Great. So you can find that. There'll also be a link to the playlist on all the streamers on our as mentioned page as well at thirdsonginpodcast.com.
All right, so that brings us to staff picks.
Randall, just around the corner from you.
Staff Picks
Or not.
is a chance to make recommendations of something new, something on the horizon, sometimes just something we found out about recently. But Rob is going to join us for our staff picks this week. But we're going to start with Chris. Chris, what is your staff pick?
I went with someone I've gone to quite a bit on staff picks, but Will Hoge just came out with a new album called The Epstein Files, and it is freaking awesome. It's hilarious and cutting and could not be more critical of the absurdity of what's going on around the Epstein Files. So he did a protest album a couple decades ago, I think, a long time ago, and he's returning there with this latest song. So that's what I'm going with. I definitely encourage you to check it out.
Is it a single or is it an album?
It's a single, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I listened to the single. You sent it to me. It's great, by the way. If you haven't listened to
Yeah.
it, Rob, it's fucking awesome. It's really good. All right, my staff pick is not political in the least, but I just read a random internet post that said they're going to reboot Miami Vice with Austin Butler and Michael B. Jordan. Are you kidding me? I am watching that movie. I hope it's true. I don't know for sure it's true. I'm pretty sure it's true, but I didn't do a lot of research. But I want to see Miami Vice with those two, and I think that would be awesome. So, do you have a staff pick for us, Rob?
I am currently obsessed with and this is so current I haven't even really dug, and I know nothing about. I mean, literally 48 hours old. I'm crushing on Paranoid Style, the band, like a pop punk ish band, but they did a satire of the worst video in creation, and it's astounding. And I found myself loving the music but also like, oh my God, they and I am of course talking about Journey's Separate Ways, where they're playing the air instruments, and they do kind of a remake of that is just spot on hilarious. and now I'm just going to be digging into this band more.
That's great. Actually, we do have a episode spotlight page on our website, and I'm going to dig that up on YouTube, and that'll go up. That should be there by the time you listen to this episode. That'll be up on our website on our episode spotlight.
Oh, and to be clear, they're called The Paranoid Style. So
Yeah. And I found them, and it seems like something I would recommend because they have all of 255 subscribers on YouTube Music, which is just
There you go. Well, thank you so much for being a guest, Rob. We had a blast. It was great talking about the book. It was great putting together the playlist. We urge everybody to find the book. The hours are long, but the pay is low wherever they sell books.
well, thanks for having me and for the attention and the obvious care you took into, actually reading the thing and asking good questions. And if anyone learned anything from this, I apologize. I didn't mean to didn't mean to teach anyone anything.
And I want to thank you also, Rob, and hope you take this the right way, but you seem like someone that we'd love to hang out and have a drink with sometime.
I do enjoy both of those things. So if you're in the area, give a holler.
I was
Absolutely.
going to say, the next time I make a random trip to see a movie in Three Oaks, you may get a text. So just be prepared.
If I'm here, I'll meet up with you.
You can always respond, "Who dis? New phone."
Break my burner in half.
Next up is Loft of Wisdom.
You better open up your eyes, baby, because fools do get wise.
Loft of Wisdom is where Tom and I basically give great quotes that line up with the theme of the episode we just did. At least that's the goal behind them. Tom, what are you adding to the Loft of Wisdom this week?
I think maybe we both did this, but I thought a lot about just loving music because Rob clearly loves music, and he really found a way without being. He is a musician, by the way. The book indicates that he played a little guitar, but he didn't want to perform. He just wanted to be part of the world, and what a way, man, did he become part of that world, in my opinion. So anyway, that's what I was thinking about, and I thought of the film Sing Street, which was written and directed by John Carney. I think I actually maybe even wrote about that in a blog a year or so ago. Love John Carney's stuff. He always creates films about music, it seems like. And in Sing Street, there's an older brother who is kind of a musician, but basically kind of a loser who lives at home. His name is Brendan, but he's being the mentor to the lead in the movie. And he says to him at one point, "Rock and roll is risk. You risk being ridiculed." And I just think that is a fantastic quote. I think it really captures what great musicians do. And I, again, love that movie. Felt like it was a good one for the law.
It is. I like it. And yes, I went down the same path. I almost quoted Rob, but that seemed a little, too pandering.
I almost did that too, by the way.
He had a great quote that I put in one of my blogs about Scott H. Byram. I'd encourage you to check that out. But I went ahead and I was inspired by one of the sections in his book about, not all associated with rock and roll or music is glamorous. And he talked about, the live shows, how, they can suck, both for the artist and the audience and for everyone else involved. And I thought back, as I mentioned on the show, about Corey Brannon and like only 10 people being there. I found a quote from Miles Davis that says, "You don't play to be seen, or we don't play to be seen. I'm addicted to music, not audiences." I hadn't thought about that, about the idea that, you're not necessarily, if you love music and you're out touring like that and playing the same songs over and over again, there's got to be a drive there to, it's like the same way we all, if you're addicted to sports or whatever it is. I thought that was very telling, and I thought it lined up with a lot of what we read about and talked about with Rob.
Yeah, that's a fantastic quote that I had never heard or seen before. And boy, to me, it particularly when he was talking about Dex Romweber and kind of those types of musicians, that's excellent. That's a really good one.
So that will bring us to one of our favorite parts that is in every episode. It's our playlist picks. Tom and I will each choose a song to add to the season-long playlist. Ideally, like we do with a Loft of Wisdom, it should be something that ties into the theme of the episode. Would you go with for your playlist, Big Tom?
I definitely went with something that ties into the episode, and in particular ties into Bloodshot Records. From 2001, one of the first, I think, Bloodshot bands to put out a full album was the band Yahoos. The album was Fear Not the Obvious, and the song is Bible and a Bottle. I put that song on the very minute after I finished Rob's book, and because I hadn't listened to Yahoos for a while, and god damn, is that a great song. And I just, I love Bloodshot Records. I love what they were doing back in the early 2000s, and I think it's going to be a good pick for the season-long playlist.
I went with a similar sentiment. I went with Bobby Bear Jr. and his song Dig Down from Young Criminals Starvation League from 2002. It sort of gets at a lot of what I think Rob was covering in the book, this idea of paying tribute to those that came before you and the music, the artists that inspire other artists. And I may have talked about, I knew you and I have talked about this, Tom, but you listen to that whole song and Bobby Bear Jr. is referencing, Chuck Berry and all these other artists. And then at the very end, you hear what is basically straight from Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones, where it's ooh, ooh, ooh,
Yeah.
ooh, and then you realize that had been running through the whole song. And you can't unhear it, but every time I hear it at the end, I'm still like, that's so freaking cool. So it's and Bobby Bear Jr.'s was on Bloodshot. There's some interesting stories in the book about him. He's someone who I wish was still out there because I loved this album in particular was fantastic. It's one of the best albums that I own, and that's what I'm adding. Seems to fit for me.
I hate to admit something like this, but you just won playlist picks this week. Because that's the perfect song for this interview and everything that Rob talked about in terms of everybody's building on everybody else. And the song is a lot about frustration, I think, because Bobby Bear's the character can't come up with something new. But what it shows is in a lot of ways you don't have to. You just build on what's before you. Because I've never heard a song like Dig Down, but all it is talking about other artists. And then, as you said, the underlying music is from another artist. So you win this one, pal, but I'll be back next week. Don't want to forget Rob's plugs. Look for Rob Miller's book at robmillerwriting.com. You can also find it at bookshop.org. That's my favorite website, by the way, for buying books as opposed to going to Amazon or to barnesandnoble.com. Bookshop.org supports independent booksellers, and his book is there. You can also find it at press.uillinois.edu, and you can find his radio show, Radio Harbor Country. I think it's radioharborcountry.com, but there will be a link to that as well as all of these other links on our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. We can't recommend this book highly enough. And although I have not tuned into his radio show, I am planning to. Now I got to listen to him and Ike Riley on the radio because they both have shows that stream on the internet.
All right. Third Song In is recorded in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Joliet, Illinois, and Sawyer, Michigan.
Please email us with your questions, your comments, and your suggestions at thirdsongin@gmail.com.
Also check out our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. We have all kinds of information on there, both from Rob. And be sure to check out the episode spotlight for this one. We think you're going to like it.
Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. We stream on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Overcast, everywhere. We stream everywhere. But what we don't have is enough stars. Give us your fucking stars.
Give us your stars and share our playlists. All those same streaming services have the playlist from Third Song In. We just added 2 new songs to the season 11 playlist. You can find that on those streaming services. You can also check out the special playlist we just did with Rob, which we're going to call Grave Robbing. You can also search for Third Song In and find any of the guest playlists that we've done over the years.
And we've also started posting links to those playlists on our As Mentioned page as well, because some people have trouble finding them when they search, and I'm not going to fix Spotify, so we decided just to give you another place to find them. We also have some social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. We'd ask that you follow us there. It's a great place to look for dates and details and other information about Third Song In and about all of our past and future guests.
Our blogs are also available on Substack. You can read them there. You can also subscribe to us. And if you do that on Friday mornings, right in your email inbox, you will get the latest blog from either Tom or me. And we take turns putting those out.
Next week is the season finale of season 11 of Third Song In. We've done another 10 episodes. I don't know if anybody cares, but that's what we did. Tune in. We're topping off the season with a discussion of our top 5 John Cusack films. I've been waiting for this one.
You've been listening to Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek. Thanks for listening. I know you have, and I can't wait for it either. Oh God, just stop. All right. I'm just gonna go with you've been listening to
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm gonna pause. We're extremely efficient over here at Third Song In. We were trying to get some shit done. Because we usually fuck it up at least 2 or 3 times before we get it right.
How do we feel about salty language?
Oh, totally supportive.
We are fucking in, man. We are ready.
Fuck.